I don't care if you have a job. You will be here 3 days early to set up the chairs, or I am cutting off your tuition today." My father's voice blasted through the phone. I clenched my jaw, a vein throbbing at my temple. He was threatening me with a college fund I hadn't touched in years. He thought he held all the cards, completely unaware that I was standing in my corner office, earning a salary that made his look like pocket change. "Go ahead," I replied quietly. "Cut it. Thank you for being here. Please grab a warm glass of water, sit down, and comment the letter Y below, so I know you are ready to listen to the rest of the story." The phone vibrated violently against the polished mahogany surface of my desk, the sudden, harsh buzzing noise shattering the deep, quiet focus of my Thursday morning. I had been deep into a complex quarterly projection, the kind of financial modeling that required absolute silence. I slowly lowered my pen and stared at the glowing caller ID on the screen. Patrick, my father. We hadn't spoken in nearly 8 months, a deliberate, heavy silence that I had carefully cultivated, fiercely protected, and deeply enjoyed. I let it ring, once, twice, 3 times. I watched the screen flash, feeling a familiar, cold, heavy knot begin to tighten in the very pit of my stomach. It was the exact same knot that always formed whenever my family suddenly decided to remember that I existed. I took a deep breath, smoothing the front of my tailored suit jacket, swiped the green icon on the screen, and brought the phone to my ear. I didn't even get the chance to offer a polite, guarded hello. "You are coming home on the 14th? His voice barked through the speaker, so loud and abrasive that I physically winced and had to pull the phone a full inch away from my ear. There was absolutely no greeting. There was no casual inquiry about my health, my life, or my well-being. There was just an absolute, unyielding, dictatorial command. "Roman's wedding is on the 17th. You will be here 3 days early. The caterers need help setting up the heavy equipment in the backyard, and I need someone to manage the parking situation on the street. I am not hiring a valet service when I have a son who can do it for free." I slowly turned my heavy, leather executive chair to look out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office. The sprawling city skyline stretched out infinitely beneath me, a gleaming testament of glass and steel to the life I had built entirely with my own 2 hands, from absolute scratch. Down there, in the corporate world, I was Elijah. I was a highly respected, fiercely competitive financial analyst who was currently on the fast track and heavily favored for a massive executive promotion. But the second I answered this phone call, I was instantly violently dragged back in time. I was transported back to being the family servant, the afterthought, the invisible child. "I have work, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice incredibly even, meticulously controlling my breathing to ensure none of my old, deeply ingrained childhood anxiety seeped into my tone. "I can't just drop everything and take 3 days off with 0 notice to fly across the country and act as an unpaid valet for Roman. I do not care if you have a job," he snapped viciously, his baseline irritation instantly boiling over into the kind of fiery rage he usually reserved for disobedient dogs. "This is your brother. This is your blood. This is family. You will be here or I am calling the bank and cutting off your tuition today. Do you hear me? I will drain that college fund so fast your head will spin. You can say goodbye to your little local college degree, and you can forget about ever seeing a single penny of your inheritance." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ground together. A thick blue vein throbbed visibly at my temple. I looked down at my left wrist, checking the time on a designer watch that cost more than his first car, and then my gaze drifted over to the heavily framed, gold-embossed degree hanging proudly on my office wall. A degree from one of the most prestigious, elite universities in the entire country. A degree I had officially earned and paid off over a year ago. He was threatening me with a weapon that had run out of ammunition long before he even pointed it at my head. He honestly thought he held all the cards. He was completely, blissfully unaware that I was standing in a corner office he could never afford to step foot in, earning a massive 6-figure salary that made his annual income look like absolute pocket change. "Go ahead," I replied quietly. The silence that followed my words stretched out between us, thick and heavy. Cut it. Excuse me? He sputtered. I could actually hear the sheer, unadulterated shock catching in his throat. Nobody ever challenged Patrick. Nobody ever said the word no when it came to his demands, especially when it came to facilitating Roman's perfect life. I said, cut the tuition. Drain the college fund. Keep the money. I am not coming to the wedding. I didn't wait for his inevitable explosive reaction. I pulled the phone away from my ear, firmly pressed the red disconnect button, and dropped the device onto the mahogany desk. My hands were visibly shaking, but not from fear. It was an intense, electric adrenaline rush of pure, unadulterated defiance. It was the very first time in my 26 years of life that I had actively, aggressively hung up on my father. The heavy, soundproofed silence of my office returned, but the emotional storm inside my head was just beginning to brew. To understand why a father would ruthlessly threaten his own son's higher education just to secure free manual labor for a backyard wedding, you have to truly understand the toxic, deeply flawed dynamic of the house I grew up in. You have to understand what it actually means to live your entire life entirely in the suffocating shadow of a golden child. Growing up, the atmosphere in my house was entirely dictated by Roman's whims. The house always smelled like whatever Roman currently desired. If Roman threw a tantrum because he wanted a heavy pot roast, the entire house smelled like roasted carrots, onions, and beef for the rest of the evening. If Roman decided he hated the pot roast and wanted pizza instead, my mother, Marin, would literally scrape the hours-long, home-cooked meal directly into the kitchen trash can without a second thought and immediately order a large, double pepperoni pizza from his favorite spot. I was just the quiet, skinny kid sitting at the corner of the table, eating whatever was eventually put in front of me, desperately trying not to take up too much physical or emotional space. I was the invisible child. It wasn't just a fleeting feeling of neglect. It was a daily, documented, irrefutable reality of my existence. The absolute clearest, most painful memory I have of this phenomenon happened when I was in the 3rd grade. I had worked tirelessly, obsessively, for an entire semester. I was a scrawny, severely introverted kid who found my only real solace in heavy textbooks, complex math problems, and quiet libraries, mostly because books and numbers didn't play favorites. They didn't care who was taller or louder. When report card day finally came around, my teacher, Mr. Harrison, handed me a piece of thick, cream-colored cardstock with a flawless row of perfect, solid A's running straight down the academic column. I practically ran the entire mile-and-a-half home. My lungs were burning, my legs ached, but my small chest swelled with a kind of profound pride I had never, ever felt before. This was it. This was the irrefutable proof of my worth. This was the piece of paper that would finally, definitively make them stop and look at me. When I burst through the heavy front door, gasping for air, my mother was standing at the kitchen island. I meticulously smoothed out the slightly crumpled edges of the report card against my shirt and held it up to her, my small hands actually trembling with pure, unadulterated excitement. She briefly glanced down, her eyes barely even registering the bold black letters printed on the page. She wiped her wet hands slowly on a floral dish towel, her facial expression remaining completely, terrifyingly flat. "That's good, Elijah," she murmured dismissively, already physically turning her back to me to check the oven. "Put it on the counter. Make sure your dirty shoes are off the rug." That was it. That's good. 2 words. There was no warm hug, no bright smile, no proud pat on the back, no promise to frame it. I stood there, frozen, the heavy paper suddenly feeling like a massive lead weight pulling down my hands. I watched her walk over to the stainless steel refrigerator. Right in the absolute dead center of the door, held up proudly by 4 strong, expensive magnets, was a drawing Roman had brought home the day before from his art class. It was supposed to be a dog. At least, I think it was a dog. It had 5 oddly shaped legs, only 1 visible ear, and was colored entirely outside the thick black lines with a dull brown crayon. Roman was a full year older than me, but his drawing honestly looked like the rushed work of a deeply distracted toddler. "Look at the shading on Roman's puppy," she said brightly to my father as he walked into the kitchen. completely ignoring my presence near the doorway. He has a real artistic eye, Patrick. I was reading online we should really look into hiring private art tutors for him to nurture this talent. My father grunted in heavy agreement, affectionately ruffling Roman's hair as my brother sat smirking at me from his seat at the kitchen table. I looked down at my perfect, hard-earned grades. The physical ache in my chest was so sharp, so violently sudden, I thought I might actually throw up or start crying. But I didn't. I had already learned that tears only brought annoyance, never comfort. Instead, I quietly, silently walked over to the heavy wooden kitchen drawer we affectionately called the junk drawer, the chaotic place where old, dead batteries, broken rubber bands, and forgotten takeout menus went to slowly die. I opened it, placed my straight-A report card face down inside the mess, and pushed the drawer shut. The wooden thud it made sounded exactly like a coffin closing on my childhood innocence. From that specific day onward, I completely understood the unwritten rules of our family game. My academic accomplishments, my milestones, my very existence were nothing more than background noise. Roman's most basic, mundane bodily functions, however, were cause for a national celebrated holiday. Roman wasn't just heavily favored. He was practically worshipped as a deity within the four walls of our house. He was a conventionally handsome, athletic kid, incredibly loud, fiercely charismatic, and unbelievably demanding. He realized very early on in his life that the world, or at least the micro-universe of our household, revolved entirely and exclusively around his shifting moods. If the atmosphere in the house ever felt thick, tense, or suffocating, it was always because Roman was unhappy about something. I distinctly remember the weekend of my 12th birthday. It felt significantly more like a somber funeral than a celebration of life. My aunt, the only extended family member who seemed to notice I existed, had sent me a small, remote-controlled sports car in the mail. It wasn't an expensive toy, probably bought on clearance, but it was mine. I was sitting quietly on the living room rug, carefully driving it in small, precise circles, desperately trying to keep the tiny electric motor quiet so I wouldn't disturb anyone. Roman, who was 13 at the time, walked into the room holding a soda. He watched the car zip around my knees for about 10 seconds. Then, without a word, he stepped forward, raised his heavy, muddy sneaker, and deliberately brought it down with all his weight directly onto the plastic chassis of the car. The loud, sickening cracking sound of the plastic shattering echoed sharply in the quiet room. I stared at the broken, jagged pieces of plastic, my eyes instantly burning with hot tears. "Why did you do that?" I yelled, my voice cracking with absolute betrayal and shock. "That was my only birthday present." Roman just shrugged casually, taking a slow sip of his soda, a cruel, satisfied smirk playing on his lips. It was making a really annoying buzzing sound. It was bothering my ears. My mother rushed into the living room, frantically wiping her hands on her apron, her face pulled into an expression of deep concern. She didn't look down at the violently broken toy scattered across the carpet. She didn't look at my tear-streaked face. She immediately rushed past me and put both of her hands gently on Roman's shoulders, inspecting him for injuries. "What's going on in here?" "Roman, sweetie, are you okay? Why is Elijah screaming at you like a maniac?" "He was driving that stupid, cheap car right at my feet on purpose." Roman lied smoothly, his voice taking on a fake, victimized whine. "I almost tripped over it and broke my ankle. He did it on purpose." My mother turned to face me, her eyes narrowing with instant, freezing disappointment. "Elijah, how many times have I told you to be careful and aware of your surroundings? You know your brother is trying out for the varsity track team next week. You could have severely injured his ankle. Pick up that broken junk, throw it in the outside garbage bin, and go straight to your room. I don't want to hear another word." I didn't argue. There was no point. I slowly crawled on the carpet, picking up the jagged pieces of my only birthday present, and carried them out to the trash can. There was absolutely no defense I could offer. The truth simply didn't matter in a corrupt court where the judge and jury were entirely blinded by blatant, toxic favoritism. Roman's reign of terror was absolute and undisputed. He aggressively dictated our family summer vacations. He aggressively chose the restaurants we ate at. He dominated the television. And he entirely consumed every single ounce of financial and emotional resource my parents had to offer. I learned to survive in that environment by simply deciding to not need anything from them. I became completely, ruthlessly self-sufficient because depending on them for even a shred of comfort meant setting myself up for inevitable, crushing disappointment. I spent my evenings studying in the local public library until they closed just to escape the chaotic noise of Roman's video games. I worked grueling, minimum-wage part-time jobs in high school, flipping burgers and stocking shelves, just to buy my own winter coats and school supplies. I was silently, methodically building an escape pod right under their noses, and they were far too obsessed with Roman to even notice I was packing my bags. The ultimate, unforgivable betrayal happened during the spring semester of my senior year of high school. I had spent 4 grueling years grinding out absolutely perfect grades, taking every advanced placement class available, joining every single extracurricular club that didn't require a financial fee, and writing college admission essays until the joints in my fingers physically cramped. My singular, burning goal was simple: get out. Get as far away from this suffocating, toxic environment as humanly possible, and never look back. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, a thick, heavy, premium paper envelope arrived in the mail with my name on it. The return address printed in the corner was from a highly prestigious, aggressively competitive, out-of-state university located on the opposite coast. My heart hammered violently against my ribs as I carefully tore the seal open. It was an official acceptance letter. But more importantly, it was accompanied by a massive, multi-page scholarship package. It wasn't a complete full ride, but the financial aid was incredibly substantial. It was enough to make the impossible actually possible. I had a ticket out. I was finally going to escape. That evening at the dinner table, I placed the thick letter gently on the table right next to my father's dinner plate. The constant clinking of silverware immediately stopped. My father slowly picked up the heavy parchment, narrowing his eyes as he read the embossed, gold leaf letterhead. His face didn't light up with pride. He didn't smile. A deep, dark frown etched itself into his forehead, and his jaw set in a hard, angry line. He looked deeply, personally inconvenienced. "What exactly is this?" he demanded, his voice low, vibrating with a dangerous, simmering anger. "I got accepted," I said, gripping the edge of my chair, trying desperately to keep my voice steady and mature. "With an academic scholarship. It's a huge grant. It covers almost 70% of the total tuition and housing costs." Marin leaned over his shoulder, reading the text on the letter. Her face immediately paled, her eyes darting nervously toward Roman. "Elijah, this university is in another state. This is literally halfway across the country. You can't just move away." "I know it is," I said, a desperate edge creeping into my voice. "That's the entire point. It's one of the top 10 business schools in the nation." My father slammed the letter face down on the dining table, hitting the wood so hard the water glasses rattled violently. Roman slowly looked up from his smartphone, a familiar, ugly smirk already forming on his face. He loved watching me get shut down. "You're not going," my father stated flatly, crossing his thick arms over his chest. "What? Why not? I literally earned this. I worked for 4 years for this. Because I am the head of this house, and I said so," he growled, pointing a thick, aggressive finger directly at my face. "Do you have any actual idea how Roman would feel if you packed up and went to some fancy, elite, Ivy League knockoff school while he's still here struggling to pass basic classes at the local community college? Do you think I'm going to let you humiliate your older brother like that in front of the whole town?" I stared at him, my mouth slightly open, genuinely unable to comprehend the sheer, twisted insanity of his logic. Humiliate him? Dad. He failed 3 core classes last semester because he literally skipped school every Friday to play video games in his room. How is my hard work humiliating to him? How is my success an insult to his laziness? "Watch your mouth when you speak about your brother," my mother shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. Your brother learns differently than you do. He has severe testing anxiety, and you are being incredibly insensitive. I don't give a damn about this piece of paper or this so-called scholarship. My father interrupted, his face flushing a deep, angry red. You are not going to that out-of-state school. You will go to the local state college right here in town, just like Roman. I will put some money in a college fund for you, but you are staying local. If you disobey me, if you try to leave, I will cut you completely out of my will. I'll cut off your inheritance. You won't see a single dime of my money ever again. Do not ever try to overshadow your brother in this house again. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of his threat left me physically breathless. They weren't just passively neglecting me anymore. They were actively, aggressively trying to sabotage my future, ruin my career prospects, and destroy my dreams just to protect the incredibly fragile, unearned ego of their golden boy. They wanted to violently clip my wings and force me to walk just so Roman wouldn't feel bad about his own refusal to learn how to fly. I slowly looked at the three of them sitting around the table, my father glaring at me with absolute contempt, my mother anxiously coddling Roman's arm, and my brother grinning at me like he had just won the lottery. In that exact, crystallizing moment, something deep inside my chest simply snapped. The sad, neglected, desperate for love child I had been died right there at the dinner table. In his place, a cold, hyper-calculating, ruthless survivor took his first breath. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a plate against the wall. I didn't cry or throw a massive teenage fit. I calmly reached across the table, picked up my prestigious acceptance letter, folded it carefully along the creases, and tucked it safely into the inside pocket of my jacket. I looked directly into my father's angry eyes, forcefully relaxing the tight muscles in my face into a perfectly crafted mask of utter submission and defeat. Okay, I said quietly, keeping my tone completely flat. My father blinked heavily, physically leaning back in his chair. He had clearly been bracing himself for a massive screaming match. Okay, he repeated, suspicious of how easy it was. Okay, you win. I'll go to the local state college in town. I paused, letting the silence hang. But I have one strict condition. He crossed his arms tighter, his eyes narrowing. I'm listening. I don't want to live at home anymore. If I am staying in town and going to the local school, I want to live in the campus dormitories. I need my own quiet space to study, away from Roman's video games and music. You pay the standard local tuition to the college, and I will cover my own dorm fees and living expenses by keeping my part-time job. My parents immediately exchanged a long, speaking look across the table. I could practically see the rusty wheels turning in their heads. They thought they had achieved a total, flawless victory. They thought they had successfully broken my rebellious spirit, crushed my ambition, and safely trapped me under their thumb, ensuring I would never step out of Roman's massive shadow. Fine, my father agreed, a deeply smug, satisfied smile finally touching the corners of his lips. We can do that. That sounds like a mature compromise. What Patrick and Marin didn't know, what they were far too arrogant to even suspect, was that I had already spent 3 hours in the library doing the exact mathematical calculations. The standard local college tuition that my father had just agreed to pay out of his own pocket was, down to the dollar, the exact amount of money I needed to completely cover the remaining 30% of my prestigious university's tuition after my massive scholarship was applied. I wasn't going to the local community college. I was going to take his controlling money, silently combine it with my hard-earned scholarship, and run as fast and as far away as I possibly could. Late August finally rolled around, the air thick and humid. I methodically packed 2 large suitcases with everything I owned. My parents didn't help me carry a single box down the stairs. They were entirely too busy in the driveway, helping Roman pick out the custom leather interior for the brand new sports car they were buying him for his sophomore year. I didn't ask for a ride. I ordered an Uber, gave the driver the address to the international airport, not the local campus, and slipped out the front door without saying a word. When the heavy commercial plane's wheels finally lifted off the tarmac, the sheer G-force pushing me back deep into my seat, a massive, crushing weight physically lifted off my chest. Looking out the scratched oval window at the rapidly shrinking, insignificant city below, I felt a vicious, intoxicating, exhilarating sense of absolute freedom. I had looked them dead in the eye and lied to their faces, and they were far too self-absorbed and obsessed with their golden child to ever bother double-checking my enrollment. It was, without a doubt, the greatest, most flawlessly executed lie I had ever told. It was the absolute bedrock foundation of the massive empire I was about to build. For the next 3 grueling, exhausting years, I lived the life of an absolute phantom. My existence was violently split down the middle into 2 entirely different, contradictory realities. In the real, physical world, I was a hyper-focused, borderline obsessive student at a fiercely elite university. I was constantly taking extra heavy course loads, pulling brutal, caffeine-fueled all-nighters in the grand, echoing architectural library, and aggressively networking with brilliant economics professors who actually saw my raw potential and actively mentored me. To survive the insane cost of living in the city, I worked brutal night shifts as a uniformed security guard at a massive corporate banking building downtown. I used the long, dead, quiet hours between midnight and 6 a.m. to study complex financial models, international market trends, and advanced economic theory under the flickering fluorescent lights of the security booth. But in my parents' completely fabricated world, I was just a mediocre, average student living in a cramped dorm room exactly 10 miles away from their suburban house. It was shockingly, almost insultingly easy to maintain the elaborate illusion. They never visited me, not once in 3 years. They never once asked to see my dorm room, they never asked to meet my college roommates, and they certainly never, ever asked to see my academic transcripts or report cards. The absolute entirety of our communication consisted of incredibly brief, tense, highly obligatory phone calls on major national holidays. When the week of Thanksgiving rolled around, the campus would completely empty out as students went home to their loving families. I would sit alone in my freezing, poorly insulated out-of-state apartment, wrap myself in a cheap blanket, put my phone on speaker, and lie through my teeth with the practiced ease of a sociopath. "Yeah, Mom, the local campus cafeteria food is terrible here. The turkey is dry," I would say, staring blankly at the frost on my window. "No, I can't come over for the family dinner tonight. I have a massive, grade-dependent biology project due on Monday, and my lab partner is useless." "Oh, well, that's fine, Elijah," she would say, her voice instantly flooding with poorly concealed relief that I wasn't coming to ruin the aesthetic. "Roman is bringing his new, very wealthy girlfriend over anyway, and the dining table is already a bit crowded. Work hard on your little project." Click. The line would go dead. "No, I love you. No, we miss you." Just the dial tone. My father was equally, pathetically easy to fool. Every single semester, like clockwork, he would automatically wire the exact, pre-agreed amount of the local college tuition directly into my checking account. The very second the funds cleared, I would immediately route that exact money electronically to the bursar's office of my prestigious university to pay off my remaining balance. He honestly believed he was paying a premium to keep me average, grounded, and safely tucked away in Roman's shadow. He was actually unwittingly funding my aggressive, unstoppable ascent to the top of the financial world. The poetic irony of it was incredibly delicious, but the reality of the situation was deeply, profoundly lonely. There were long, dark nights when I stared blindly at the water-stained ceiling of my apartment, my stomach growling because I skipped dinner to buy textbooks, wondering what it would actually be like to have a family who genuinely wanted to attend my graduation, or simply call just to ask about my day. But the sharp, biting pain of their total absence was far, far less destructive than the suffocating pain of their toxic presence. So, I weaponized that deep loneliness. I used it as high-octane fuel. Every single time my eyes burned with exhaustion, every time I desperately wanted to close my laptop and quit, I vividly remembered the harsh, cruel sound of my father threatening my inheritance at the dinner table, and I pushed myself 10 times harder. My relentless, borderline unhealthy pace finally paid off. By taking maximum course overloads every single semester and refusing to take a break during the hot summer sessions, I managed to successfully complete an incredibly difficult 4-year advanced finance degree in just under 3 years. I graduated at the absolute top of my class, securing the valedictorian spot. I sat quietly in the center of the massive, sun-drenched university stadium, dressed in my heavy black cap and gown. All around me, thousands of cheering families, weeping mothers, and incredibly proud fathers were holding giant bouquets of flowers, colorful balloons, and aggressively snapping hundreds of photographs. The metal folding seat directly next to me remained completely, painfully empty. Nobody bought a plane ticket to fly out to see me walk across the stage. Nobody in my bloodline even knew I was graduating today. When they called my name, I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, and smiled brightly for the official university photographer, gripping the heavy leather binder holding my diploma so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't need them to clap for me. I was clapping for myself. Exactly 2 weeks after that lonely graduation ceremony, I confidently walked into the sleek, intimidating, glass-paneled headquarters of one of the top financial investment firms in the country for my final, decisive interview. The CEO of the firm, Mr. Henderson, a fiercely intimidating, stern older man with sharp, calculating eyes, meticulously reviewed my aggressive portfolio, my perfect transcripts, and my shockingly young age. You fast-tracked one of the most difficult degrees in the country, maintained a flawless 4.0 GPA, and worked full-time overnight security to pay for it without Daddy's help. Mr. Henderson said slowly, tapping his expensive silver pen rhythmically on his massive oak desk, his eyes locking onto mine. You're hungry, Elijah. You're starving for success. I like hungry. Hungry men make me money. He offered me the highly coveted junior analyst position on the absolute spot. The starting salary he wrote down on the paper was a massive 6 figures, plus performance bonuses. The very moment I signed the thick legal contract, cementing my future, I walked out of the towering glass building, went to the most expensive steakhouse in the city, and bought myself a dry-aged steak dinner, paying with my own hard-earned cash. I was barely 22 years old, completely, fiercely independent, holding zero debt, and actively making significantly more money in my first year than my father had ever made in his entire mediocre career. Within 12 months, my aggressive, highly successful portfolio management caught the serious attention of the senior partners on the upper floor. I was officially put on the fast track for a massive promotion to senior analyst. It was during this incredibly chaotic, high-stress time that I met Chloe. She was a seasoned senior analyst, a sharp-witted, fiercely intelligent woman in her late 40s who took one look at my aggressive work ethic and immediately took me under her wing. Chloe had an uncanny, almost terrifying ability to completely read people's hidden traumas. One late evening, while we were sitting in the quiet office reviewing complex international market trends, she lowered her reading glasses and looked at me intensely. "You work like someone is actively hunting you with a shotgun, Elijah," she noted casually, sipping her black coffee. "It's impressive, but it's terrifying." I chuckled dryly, staring blankly at the glowing numbers on my monitor. "More like I'm running away from someone, Chloe, and I need to build a wall of cash so high they can never climb over it." Over the next few intense months of working closely together, Chloe organically became the deeply supportive mentor and fierce older sister figure I never had growing up. One night over drinks, I finally broke down and told her the absolute truth about my deeply toxic family, the fake community college enrollment, the hidden elite degree, and the financial manipulation. She didn't judge me. She didn't offer toxic positivity. She just listened carefully, her dark eyes filling with a fierce, protective, motherly anger. "You protect your absolute peace, kid," she told me firmly, tapping her manicured finger on the table. "Blood doesn't make a family. Respect, loyalty, and shared trauma make a family. Let the leeches drown in their own swamp." I genuinely thought I had successfully, permanently locked my dark past away in a heavy iron box and thrown away the key. I was completely wrong. The past has a remarkably funny, cruel way of violently kicking the door off the hinges right when you finally start to feel completely safe. The nightmare started completely unexpectedly with a simple text message from an unknown number. It contained a digital, incredibly gaudy invitation heavily laden with gold foil animation and falling digital rose petals. The bold, cursive text read, "You are joyfully and formally invited to the grand union of Roman and Isabella." I sat frozen in my ergonomic office chair, staring blindly at the glowing screen, my stomach dropping violently to the floor. Roman was actually getting married? To a woman named Isabella? Who in their right mind would marry Roman? Before my brain could even begin to process the ridiculous, unexpected information, the phone call came. The one that officially started this whole disastrous mess. The aggressive ultimatum from my father, loudly demanding my physical presence, demanding my free manual labor, and ruthlessly threatening to cut off my completely non-existent college fund if I dared to disobey his royal decree. After I hung up on him, my hands still buzzing with a massive hit of adrenaline and unresolved childhood anger, I numbly opened the digital invitation again. There was a hyperlink to a custom wedding website. I clicked it out of morbid curiosity. The web page was an absolute, towering monument to extreme narcissism and delusion. Massive, highly edited professional engagement photos showed Roman grinning arrogantly, wearing a designer suit, standing next to a stunningly beautiful, incredibly polished woman. Isabella looked like she had just stepped off the runway or the cover of an expensive bridal magazine. The About Us bio described her in glowing terms as a highly successful, independent entrepreneur hailing from a deeply wealthy, traditional background. Then I clicked on the wedding registry tab. It was completely insane. They weren't asking for toasters or towels. They were demanding custom designer luggage sets, $5,000 high-end espresso machines, and explicitly asking for massive cash contributions to fund a luxurious, month-long honeymoon resort stay in the Maldives. The sickening reality hit me like a physical punch to the gut. My father didn't aggressively demand I come home because he wanted me there to celebrate my brother's love. He didn't want a family reunion. He wanted me there to act as the ugly duckling, the designated failure, the background prop to make Roman shine brighter. He wanted to show off his handsome, golden son and his incredibly wealthy, trophy daughter-in-law to the entire neighborhood, and he desperately needed me there to physically carry the heavy catering boxes, set up the cheap folding chairs, and park the guests' cars in the hot sun to make them look even more elevated, successful, and elite by comparison. The sheer, breathtaking entitlement of the demand made me physically nauseous. I had spent 3 grueling years breaking my back to build a life of genuine dignity and profound financial success, and they wanted to violently drag me back into the dirt just so they could wipe their expensive shoes on my back. I abruptly stood up, walked out of my quiet corner office, and headed straight for the employee break room. Chloe was standing by the counter, calmly pouring a cup of dark roast coffee. She took one single look at my pale, rigid face and slowly set the glass pot down. "Who died? And where do I need to hide the body?" she asked seriously. "Nobody died," I said, grabbing a plastic cup and pouring myself a glass of ice water just to hold something freezing cold to ground my racing thoughts. "But my brother is getting married. My father just commanded me to fly home 3 days early to do manual labor for the caterers. He threatened to call the bank and cut off my college tuition if I don't." Chloe's perfectly drawn eyebrows shot up to her hairline. She knew exactly what that meant. She knew my father was aggressively threatening to stop paying for a degree I already had hanging on my wall. A slow, highly dangerous, incredibly satisfied smile spread across her face. "Oh, honey, this is incredibly rich. What exactly did you say to him?" "I told him to cut the tuition and I hung up the phone." "Good boy," she said, reaching out to firmly pat my arm. "Don't you dare book a flight. Don't you dare step 1 foot back into that toxic wasteland. You are a massive shark now, Elijah. You swim in the deep end. Do not ever go back to the kiddie pool just because the little leeches miss sucking your blood." Chloe was absolutely right, as she usually was. But aggressively hanging up the phone was only the very first, minor volley in an emotional war I knew with absolute certainty was coming my way. Within 10 minutes of disconnecting my father's threatening call, my cell phone began to vibrate violently and continuously on my desk, buzzing like an angry hornet. It was my mother. I actively ignored the incoming calls, letting them roll to voicemail, so she quickly switched tactics to rapid-fire text messages. I sat deep in my heavy leather chair and watched the notifications endlessly roll across my locked screen, witnessing an absolute masterclass in extreme emotional manipulation and toxic guilt. Mom. Elijah, your father is incredibly upset and pacing the house. Why are you acting like this? This is extremely selfish. Mom. This is Roman's incredibly special day. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Do you really want to be known as the bitter brother who ruins his own brother's wedding? Mom. Isabella's family is very traditional and very wealthy. What on earth will they think of us if the groom's own brother isn't even there to help out? We only get one family, Elijah. You need to apologize to your father immediately. I stared blankly at that last, manipulative message. We only get one family. That was the heavy, rusty weapon they always used when they wanted compliance. The heavy, suffocating guilt trip meticulously designed to make you completely forget years of profound emotional abuse and neglect. I felt a familiar, uncomfortable tightening in my chest. The tiny, desperate little boy inside me who just wanted his mother's basic approval and a shred of affection was stirring in the dark, forgotten corners of my mind, whispering that maybe I should just go and keep the peace. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I didn't type out a massive, emotional paragraph explaining my deep feelings or my past trauma. I didn't list out my years of valid grievances or demand an apology. I simply typed 3 cold, absolute words. Me, I am not coming. I hit send. Then, without a second of hesitation, I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, shoved it deep into my leather briefcase, and zipped it shut. I spent the rest of my afternoon aggressively burying myself in complex financial spreadsheets, quarterly revenue projections, and stock market analysis. I forcefully redirected my brain to focus entirely on the hard numbers. In the spreadsheet, things made perfect sense. In the spreadsheet, pure logic ruled absolutely, and messy, toxic emotions simply did not exist. When I finally pulled my phone out in the echoing, concrete parking garage that evening, the screen was flooded. There were 24 missed calls and a massive barrage of angry texts, not just from my mother, but from my aunt and a cousin I hadn't spoken a single word to in over 5 years. They had successfully mobilized the flying monkeys to harass me into submission. But the notification that immediately caught my attention wasn't a text message. It was a lengthy 3-minute voicemail from my father. I got into my car, a sleek, incredibly quiet luxury sedan I had bought myself as a reward for my massive promotion. I connected the phone to the car's Bluetooth system, started the engine, and hit play on the screen. The luxurious leather interior of my car instantly filled with the heavy, ragged, furious sound of Patrick's breathing. Elijah. My father's voice echoed loudly through the premium surround sound speakers. He wasn't yelling anymore. He had dropped the explosive anger and was now using his dangerously calm, deeply disappointed voice. The exact tone he used right before he broke something you loved or grounded you for a month. Your mother has been sitting in the kitchen crying hysterically for 2 straight hours because of your text message. You are actively tearing this entire family apart over your petty, childish jealousy. You are ruining your brother's life. I gripped the smooth leather steering wheel tightly, shaking my head in the dim light of the parking garage. Jealousy? He honestly, truly still believed that I was deeply jealous of Roman's pathetic, directionless life. We have a serious, respectable reputation to maintain in this town, the voicemail continued, the calm facade slightly cracking to reveal the panic underneath. Mrs. Gable next door has already been asking your mother if you're going to be in the main wedding party. The whole street is talking. Do you honestly think I want to have to stand out on my driveway and explain to the entire neighborhood that my youngest son is throwing a selfish tantrum and refusing to attend? Do you think I want the neighbors comparing our family to the Miller family's messy, disgusting divorce or their incredibly ugly child custody battles? No, absolutely not. We are a good, respectable family. We do not air our dirty laundry. You are going to go to a store, you are going to put on a fitted suit, you are going to smile for the cameras, and you are going to stand quietly next to your brother where you belong." There it was. The absolute, undeniable truth laid bare. Mrs. Gable, the neighborhood gossip queen. This entire, aggressive charade, this desperate, heavy-handed need for my physical presence, had absolutely nothing to do with family unity, love, or brotherhood. It was entirely about maintaining appearances. Patrick was absolutely terrified that my noticeable absence would deeply tarnish the pristine, flawless image of his perfect suburban family life in front of Isabella's wealthy parents. I was nothing more than a convenient, living prop he desperately needed to stage the perfect family photo for social media. "I am giving you one final, absolute last chance to fix this." The voicemail went ice cold, dropping the last shred of paternal pretense. "You will call me back tonight, you will sincerely apologize to your mother, and you will forward me the confirmation email of your booked flight. If you do not do this, I swear to God, Elijah, I am calling the bursar's office at your local college first thing tomorrow morning when they open. I will formally withdraw my financial support. I will demand a refund of this semester's tuition, and I will personally see to it that you are completely unenrolled and kicked out of your dorm. You can flip burgers and sleep on the street for the rest of your miserable life. Do not test my resolve." The heavy message ended with a harsh, electronic beep. I sat in the dark, silent parking garage, the powerful engine of my luxury car idling silently beneath me. A profound, overwhelming sense of absolute disgust washed over me, immediately followed by a massive, unstoppable wave of dark, cynical humor. A short, sharp laugh escaped my lips, echoing loudly in the quiet cabin. He was going to call the local community college. He was actually genuinely going to march down there in his cheap suit and try to violently ruin a life I didn't even live anymore. He honestly thought he was holding a fully loaded gun directly to my head, ready to pull the trigger on my future, but he was pointing a plastic water pistol at a ghost who had moved out 3 years ago. I didn't wait until I got home to my expensive apartment. I didn't want to give him the twisted satisfaction of thinking I was sitting in my room, sweating over his aggressive deadline, crying and begging for his forgiveness. I reached out and hit dial on my car's dashboard touchscreen. He answered on the very first, incredibly aggressive ring. "Have you finally come to your senses, boy?" he demanded, his voice thick with unearned triumph and smug superiority. "I listened to your voicemail," I said, my voice completely, terrifyingly devoid of any emotion whatsoever. I sounded like a complete stranger, even to myself. I sounded like Mr. Henderson shutting down a bad deal. "And?" he pushed, waiting for the apology he felt he was owed. "And I want to be perfectly, crystal clear with you, Patrick," I said, intentionally dropping the title of Dad and using his first name. I clearly heard a sharp, shocked intake of breath on his end of the line. "I am not coming to the wedding. I do not care about Mrs. Gable's gossip. I do not care what the neighbors think about your fake reputation. And I certainly do not care about funding or supporting Roman's incredibly fake, desperately staged photo ops to impress his scam of a bride. How dare you speak to your father like I'm speaking?" I cut him off sharply, my voice cracking like a whip. "You threaten my college fund. You actively threaten to destroy my education and my future to get your way. So here is my final, absolute answer to your ultimatum. Go ahead." "What?" he stammered, his brain clearly, violently short-circuiting as his ultimate trump card failed to work. "Call the college," I said, enunciating every single syllable slowly and clearly so there could be no misunderstanding. "Go down there tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. March right into the Dean of Admissions office and demand they withdraw my tuition. Take every single penny back. Take it all. Use it to buy Roman a slightly nicer tuxedo so he doesn't look so pathetic. I am officially done playing this sick, twisted game with you. You arrogant, ungrateful little brat." He spat, his voice suddenly trembling with a rage so deep, so purely violent, it sounded almost demonic. "You think you can survive in the real world without my money? You think you can pay for school and rent on a minimum wage loser's salary? I will completely ruin you. I am driving to that campus tomorrow morning, and I am personally pulling your name from the registry. You will be nothing but a failure. You will come crawling back to me begging for scraps. Have fun with that? I said softly, a genuine smile finally touching my lips, and for the second time in 24 hours, I pressed the button on my steering wheel and hung up on him. I put the luxury car in drive, pressed the accelerator, and pulled smoothly out of the dark parking garage, seamlessly merging into the vibrant, chaotic city traffic. The bright neon streetlights blurred past my tinted windows. I felt physically lighter than I had in over a decade. I knew exactly, minute by minute, what was going to happen tomorrow morning. I knew the exact, hilarious sequence of humiliating events that was about to violently unfold at the local community college admissions office. My father was about to confidently walk face first into a massive, spinning buzzsaw of his own making, and the absolute best part of the entire situation was that he was running full speed toward it with a smug, victorious smile on his face. He thought he was going to teach his disobedient youngest son a harsh, unforgettable lesson about power, money, and respect. He was about to learn, in the most humiliating public way possible, that he had absolutely none of those things. The next morning, I woke up feeling incredibly rested. I didn't set an alarm. I rolled out of my expensive mattress, walked into my high-end kitchen, and brewed myself a cup of premium dark roast coffee. I stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling window of my downtown apartment, watching the city wake up beneath me. I glanced at the digital clock on my microwave. It read 8:15 a.m. Right about now, I knew exactly where Patrick was. I could perfectly picture the entire humiliating scene playing out in my head. My father was a man who worshipped his own authority. He had undoubtedly woken up early, put on his best, slightly outdated business suit, and driven his mid-tier sedan to the local community college campus. He would have marched past the sprawling oak trees and directly into the main administration building with the furious, determined stride of a man who believed he owned the entire world. He would have slammed his hands down on the polished laminate counter of the bursar's office, demanding to speak to the highest authority available. I could imagine him sitting aggressively in the small, cramped office of Dean Miller. The dean, a tired academic who dealt with thousands of students, would be staring at Patrick over his reading glasses. My father would have launched into his prepared speech. He would have loudly declared that he was formally withdrawing all financial support for his deeply ungrateful son, Elijah. He would have demanded an immediate refund of the current semester's college fund. He would have demanded that my name be completely struck from the enrollment records. He wanted me locked out of the dorms by noon. He wanted to inflict maximum, devastating financial pain to teach me a lesson about family loyalty. And then, the beautiful, inevitable slap of reality would hit him directly across the face. Dean Miller would have turned to his computer monitor, his fingers clacking across the keyboard. He would have typed my name. He would have typed my social security number. He would have scowled, cleared his throat, and typed it again. And then, he would have looked up at my furious, incredibly arrogant father. "Sir," Dean Miller would say, his voice laced with pure, absolute confusion, "I have no idea what you are talking about." My father would have puffed out his chest. "I am talking about my son, Elijah. I pay his tuition out of my own pocket every single semester." "Mr. Patrick," the dean would reply slowly, turning the computer monitor around so my father could see the stark, empty database. "We have no record of any student by that name. No one named Elijah has been enrolled at this institution for the past 4 years. We have not received a single dime of tuition money from you for this student. Are you entirely sure you are at the correct college?" I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my black coffee. The sheer, unadulterated humiliation my father must have felt in that tiny office would have been absolutely staggering. The massive, inflated balloon of his parental authority had just been violently popped by a tired college administrator with a Dell computer. Patrick didn't have the power to ruin my life. He didn't have the power to pull my funding. He had absolutely nothing. He was a king sitting on a completely fake throne, and the peasant he thought he was crushing had secretly bought the entire castle. My cell phone, resting on the granite kitchen island, suddenly vibrated. The caller ID flashed brightly. It was him. It was exactly 8:32 a.m. He hadn't even waited to get back to his car. He was probably standing in the middle of the campus quad, completely losing his mind. I set my coffee mug down. I let it ring 4 times, just to make him sweat, before I calmly swiped the screen to answer. "Where are you?" My father's voice exploded through the phone speaker. It wasn't his usual booming, authoritative roar. His voice was actually shaking. It sounded incredibly thin, strained, and laced with absolute, terrifying panic. "I am standing in the admissions office. They are telling me you don't go here. They are telling me you never went here. What did you do with my money? Elijah, where is the college fund?" "I spent it," I replied, my voice completely smooth and detached. "You spent it?" he shrieked, the volume peaking so high the speaker crackled. "You stole from me? You stole thousands of dollars? I will call the police right now. I will have you arrested for massive fraud." "Call them?" I challenged him, leaning casually against the kitchen counter. "Call the police, Patrick. Tell them you voluntarily wired money into a bank account with my name on it for 3 years. Tell them you never once bothered to ask for a single receipt, a single report card, or a single proof of enrollment because you were entirely too busy buying Roman expensive sports cars. The police will laugh you right off the precinct steps." "Where are you?" he demanded again, his breathing ragged and heavy. "Are you living on the streets? Are you on drugs? If you didn't go to college, what have you been doing for 3 years?" "I didn't say I didn't go to college, Dad. I said I didn't go to that college." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the phone line. I could practically hear the gears violently grinding to a halt in his brain. "What are you talking about?" he whispered. "Remember that highly prestigious, out-of-state university you explicitly forbade me from attending?" I asked, keeping my tone conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "The one you said would humiliate Roman? The one you threatened my inheritance over? You didn't." The denial in his voice was thick and desperate. "I did. I took the massive academic scholarship I earned. I combined it with the local tuition money you blindly sent me, and I moved across the country. I lived in a freezing apartment. I worked full-time night shifts as a security guard, and I took maximum credits." "You're lying," he stammered. "You couldn't survive that. You're just a kid." "I graduated a year ago, Patrick." I dropped the final, devastating bomb. "I graduated as the valedictorian of my class. I currently work as a senior financial analyst at one of the top investment firms in the country. My starting salary was in the mid-6 figures. I just got a massive promotion last week. I literally make significantly more money in a single month than you make in an entire year." I waited for the explosion. I waited for the screaming, but it didn't come. There was just a dead, hollow silence on the other end of the line. The truth was too massive, too undeniable for his fragile ego to process. He had spent his entire life treating me like a pathetic, invisible failure, a background character in Roman's glorious story. And in the span of a 3-minute phone call, the entire foundation of his reality had been completely obliterated. I wasn't just independent. I was wildly, undeniably successful. I had completely outgrown him, out-earned him, and outsmarted him, and I had done it entirely under his nose. "You lied to us?" My father finally spoke, his voice completely devoid of his usual aggressive bravado. He sounded old. He sounded defeated. But true to his deeply toxic nature, he immediately pivoted to play the victim. "You deceived your own flesh and blood. You are an absolute traitor to this family. We fed you, we housed you, and you treated us like an ATM. You ignored me for 18 years. I corrected him sharply, my voice hardening into steel. "You threw my achievements in the trash. You tried to intentionally sabotage my entire future just so your golden boy wouldn't feel insecure about his own failures. I didn't betray this family. You abandoned me long before I ever packed my bags. You owe me," he growled desperately, grasping at straws. "You owe me that tuition money back. Every single red cent. Take me to civil court? I laughed. A cold, hard sound. Hire a lawyer. I will happily sit in front of a judge and explain exactly why you wired me that money. I'll even bring my bank statements. But we both know you won't do that. Because you are absolutely terrified of public embarrassment. You are terrified of Mrs. Gable finding out your youngest son manipulated you for 3 years. He knew I was right. The silence confirmed it. But then, in a move of such breathtaking, staggering audacity that it almost left me speechless, Patrick completely shifted his tone. The anger vanished, replaced by a desperate, slimy negotiation tactic. "Fine," he said, clearing his throat. "Fine. You're successful. You made your point. You're a big shot now. Listen to me, Elijah. Roman's wedding is in 3 days. Isabella's family is extremely wealthy. If you are making that kind of money, you need to be there. You need to drive down here in whatever luxury car you bought yourself. You need to wear an expensive custom suit, and you need to stand proudly next to us. We can show them that our family is just as elite as theirs. We can show them we are a dynasty." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at the screen in pure disbelief. After everything I just revealed, after the lies, the manipulation, and the blatant abuse, his only concern was figuring out how to weaponize my financial success to boost his own fake social status. He didn't care about my hard work. He just saw a shiny new prop he could use to impress his wealthy new in-laws. "You are truly, unbelievably pathetic," I said, my voice dropping to a low, disgusted whisper. "You don't want a son. You want a billboard. Elijah, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable." I cut him off for the very last time. "You made your choice a long time ago. You chose Roman. You coddled him, you spoiled him, and you built your entire life around him. So here is the reality, Patrick. You only have one son. Go to his wedding. Smile for the cameras. Play the proud father. But do not ever contact me again. I am entirely dead to you. Don't you dare hang up on me. I am your father." I didn't just hang up. I ended the call, went into my phone's contact settings, and hit block caller. I didn't stop there. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked Roman's number. I blocked every single aunt, uncle, and cousin who had ever enabled their toxic behavior. With a few simple taps on a glass screen, I completely severed the heavy, rusted chains that had dragged me down my entire life. I set the phone down on the counter. The apartment was completely silent. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill my lungs. For the first time in my life, I was completely, undeniably free. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment 1 below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. For an entire month, my life was an absolute, peaceful paradise. The heavy, suffocating anxiety that used to sit squarely on my chest every time my phone screen lit up was completely gone. I threw myself entirely into my career. I closed 3 major accounts at the firm, securing my position as one of the top earners in my division. My recent promotion came with a massive corner office and a significant bonus, which I immediately invested into a diverse, high-yield portfolio. I spent my weekends trying out expensive new restaurants with Chloe, hiking in the nearby mountains, and genuinely enjoying the quiet, peaceful sanctuary of my own mind. I assumed the battle was officially over. I assumed my family had finally taken the massive, undeniable hint and decided to focus all their chaotic energy on Roman's new, supposedly elite marriage. I thought the trash had finally taken itself out. I was wrong. Toxic families don't just let their favorite scapegoat walk away that easily. They need someone to blame when things inevitably go wrong. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my expensive leather sofa, watching a documentary and reviewing some digital files on my tablet. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. The caller ID simply read, Unknown number. Normally, I would send an unknown number straight to voicemail, but I was waiting for a call from a high-profile client who often used private lines. I paused the TV, cleared my throat, and answered professionally. Elijah speaking. Elijah? Oh, thank God you picked up. A voice sobbed loudly into the receiver. My blood instantly ran ice cold. It was Marin, my mother. She was crying so hard she was practically hyperventilating. The sound wet and incredibly desperate. I sat up straight, my muscles instantly tensing. I hadn't heard her cry like this since my grandfather's funeral over a decade ago. How did you get this number? I demanded, my voice hard and entirely unforgiving. I bought a prepaid burner phone, she gasped, sniffing loudly. You blocked all of us. You blocked the house line. Elijah, please don't hang up, please. I am begging you as your mother. I kept the phone pressed to my ear, my eyes narrowing. You have exactly 60 seconds to tell me why you are calling before I block this number too. I miss you, she wailed, the manipulation tactics instantly kicking into high gear. I just want my baby boy back. I don't care what you said to your father. I don't care about the college money or the lies. None of that matters to me anymore. I just want my family to be whole again. Please, Elijah, tell me where you live. Tell me your address. Let me come see you. We need you to come back to us. I sat in the dim light of my living room, my brain rapidly processing her words. Something was fundamentally, completely wrong. This wasn't the arrogant, demanding mother who had texted me a month ago, ordering me to apologize and serve as a valet at a wedding. This was a woman who sounded completely broken, desperate, and deeply terrified. Furthermore, where was this intense, overwhelming maternal love when I was a kid? Where was this desperate need for my presence when she was throwing my report cards in the junk drawer? She didn't want to patch things up because she suddenly realized the error of her ways. Toxic people don't suddenly find enlightenment overnight. They only reach out to the people they discarded when they absolutely need a brand new safety net. Don't play games with me, Marin, I said coldly. You don't miss me. You need something. What happened? Nothing happened, she cried, her voice cracking sharply. I just love you. Is it a crime for a mother to want to see her highly successful son? You're doing so well now. You have that big salary. You have a big apartment. We are your family, Elijah. We should share our successes. There it was. The hook. The incredibly obvious, greedy little hook. She mentioned my salary. She mentioned my success. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling because she smelled money, and she was desperate to sink her teeth into my wallet. I'm not doing this, I said flatly. Do not ever call this number again. I hung up the phone and instantly blocked the burner number. But the brief, chaotic phone call had successfully planted a massive seed of suspicion in my mind. My mother was a deeply proud, incredibly arrogant woman. She would never debase herself by sobbing over the phone to the son she hated unless she was completely, entirely out of options. Something catastrophic had happened to the Golden family. I needed information, but I wasn't going to get it from the liars themselves. I opened my laptop and pulled up my contacts. I scrolled past the blocked numbers until I found the one person in my extended family who actually possessed a functioning moral compass and a healthy dose of common sense. Aunt Sarah. Sarah was my mother's younger sister. She was a loud, fiercely independent nurse who had always loudly criticized my parents' blatant favoritism toward Roman. She was the one who had sent me the remote-controlled car for my birthday. She usually kept her distance from family drama, preferring to observe the train wreck from a safe distance. If anyone knew the exact details of the radioactive fallout that had clearly occurred, it was her. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Well, Aunt Sarah's raspy voice came through the speaker. If it isn't the prodigal son who successfully escaped the asylum. I was wondering when you would finally call. Hello, Aunt Sarah. I smiled genuinely for the first time that night. It's good to hear your voice. I assume you know I blocked everyone. Oh, honey, I know. She laughed a deep, throaty laugh. Your father was screaming loud enough to break glass. He told the entire extended family that you were a pathological liar who secretly dropped out of school to become a criminal. I didn't believe a single word of it. You were always too smart for their nonsense. I'm assuming you finally got a good job and told them to kick rocks. Something like that, I admitted. I'm doing really well, Sarah. I'm a senior financial analyst in the city. I just bought my own place. I am so incredibly proud of you, Elijah, she said softly, and I could hear the genuine warmth in her tone. You survived them. Not many kids could do that. Thank you, I said, feeling a sudden lump in my throat. I cleared it quickly. Listen, Sarah. I just got a call from a burner phone. It was my mother. She was crying hysterically, begging me to come back, talking about my salary. What the hell is going on over there? A long, heavy sigh echoed over the line. Oh, kid, you don't know? You really missed the entire fireworks show. Tell me everything. You remember that big, fancy, incredibly expensive wedding Roman was supposed to have? Sarah asked, her voice dropping into a serious, gossipy register. The one with the wealthy, perfect bride named Isabella? Yeah, the one Patrick threatened to ruin my life over if I didn't show up to park cars. Well, Sarah said slowly, dragging out the suspense. There was no wedding, Elijah. It was a complete, absolute disaster. A total bloodbath. The whole thing was a massive, incredibly elaborate scam. I sat completely still on my sofa, my grip tightening on the phone. A scam? What do you mean? I mean, Isabella wasn't an incredibly wealthy, successful entrepreneur. She was a professional, highly skilled con artist. And she took your entire family for absolutely everything they had. I felt a massive, dark wave of pure, unadulterated shock wash over me, immediately followed by a sharp, incredibly intense spike of vindication. The golden child hadn't just stumbled. He had actively driven the entire family car straight off a massive financial cliff. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Sarah, I whispered, don't leave out a single detail. It was a masterclass in manipulation, Aunt Sarah explained, her voice a mix of awe and deep disgust. This girl, Isabella, she played your family like a cheap fiddle. She realized exactly what Roman was on their very first date. He's a deeply insecure, incredibly arrogant man who desperately wants to look rich without actually doing any of the hard work. I nodded silently. That was the most accurate description of my brother I had ever heard. She played right into his massive ego, Sarah continued. She rented expensive luxury cars, wore high-end designer clothes with the tags carefully hidden, and constantly talked about her massive offshore crypto portfolios and real estate investments. She made Roman feel like he was dating royalty. Your parents were completely blinded by the flashing lights. Patrick saw her as the ultimate status symbol to parade in front of the neighbors, and Maren was thrilled that her golden boy snagged a billionaire. How did she get their money? I asked, the financial analyst in my brain rapidly putting the terrible pieces together. She waited until they were completely hooked on the wedding planning, Sarah said. They were booking expensive venues, hiring luxury caterers. Then, a month before the wedding, Isabella sat them down in their living room. She told them she had an incredibly exclusive, once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. A tech startup that was about to go public. She claimed she could guarantee a 300% return on their investment in just 6 weeks, right before the wedding day. And they fell for it? I asked, genuinely astounded by their sheer stupidity. Patrick is a paranoid control freak. He doesn't trust anyone with his money. He trusted her because Roman vouched for her. Sarah sighed heavily. Roman convinced your father that this was their big ticket to early retirement. So, Patrick drained his entire savings account. He emptied the very college fund he aggressively threatened to cut you off from. Maren cashed out her small retirement 401k. But it gets worse. They actively convinced Uncle Robert to invest his money too. You know Robert, he's always looking for a quick payout. I closed my eyes, rubbing my temples. The sheer scale of the financial destruction was staggering. How much did she take? Combined? Upwards of $400,000, Sarah revealed grimly. They wired the funds to an offshore account she set up under a fake LLC. 2 days later, Isabella had an appointment for her final wedding dress fitting at an incredibly expensive boutique downtown. Marin and Roman waited in the lobby for 3 hours. Isabella went into the dressing room and literally climbed out the back window. She vanished completely into thin air. Her phone was disconnected. The luxury apartment she claimed she owned was actually a short-term Airbnb. She was a complete ghost. I let out a low, long whistle. The perfect, golden bride was a professional predator, and she had completely gutted them. The police are involved, Sarah added. The FBI is involved. But the money is gone, Elijah. It's completely untraceable. They are entirely wiped out. That explains why Marin was crying on the phone, I said, a cold, hard knot of pure logic forming in my chest. They're broke. They need cash to pay for the expensive wedding vendors they already booked. Oh, honey, it is so much worse than that, Aunt Sarah interrupted, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. The vendors are the absolute least of their massive problems. Remember how I said they gave her $400,000? Well, Patrick didn't actually have that much liquid cash in his savings account. Not even close. Then where did he get the rest of the money? He secretly took out a massive second mortgage on the house. Sarah dropped the heaviest bomb yet. Without telling Marin, he leveraged the entire equity of the family home to chase Isabella's fake investment, totally convinced he would pay it back in a month and pocket the profit. When the scam collapsed, the bank immediately came knocking for their massive monthly payment. Patrick couldn't pay it. He completely defaulted. My jaw physically dropped. Patrick, the man who cared about his suburban reputation more than his own flesh and blood, had actively gambled away the very roof over their heads. And because bad news loves company, Sarah continued relentlessly, the intense stress of losing the money made Patrick completely snap at work. He got into a massive, screaming altercation with a long-term employee and aggressively shoved the man against a wall. The employee immediately quit and hired a ruthless lawyer. He sued the company for workplace assault and hostile environment. To avoid a massive, public lawsuit, the company quietly fired Patrick without a severance package. I sat in absolute, stunned silence. The domino effect of their greed and arrogance was completely biblical. So, no savings, no job, and a massive defaulted mortgage. I summarized, my voice completely flat. Exactly. The bank immediately initiated foreclosure proceedings. They lost the house, Elijah. They had to pack their bags in the middle of the night to avoid Mrs. Gable and the neighbors seeing them. They are currently living in a rundown, cramped trailer park on the absolute outskirts of town because it's the only place that would accept their destroyed credit. And the best part? They violently blame Roman for the entire thing. The house is a constant, screaming war zone. Patrick yells at Roman for bringing the scammer home. Roman yells at Patrick for being stupid enough to invest. It's like a messy child custody battle over who gets the blame. It was pure, undeniable karma. The universe had violently balanced the scales. The family that had treated me like worthless garbage, the father who threatened to ruin my future to protect his image, the golden child who bullied me and took everything for granted. They had completely destroyed themselves. They didn't even need my help to do it. They handed the matches to a complete stranger and watched their entire elite empire burn to the ground. They know you have a high-paying salary now, Sarah warned me, her voice turning fiercely protective. Patrick squeezed the information out of a distant cousin who saw your updated LinkedIn profile. They know you have money, Elijah. They are going to come looking for you. They see you as their personal bailout plan. Let them try, I said softly, staring at my expensive, heavily reinforced front door. Thank you for telling me, Sarah. I owe you a nice dinner. Just keep your doors locked, kid. Stay safe. Aunt Sarah's warning proved to be highly accurate. It only took them 3 days to aggressively track down my physical location. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. I was sitting at my kitchen island, calmly reviewing a complex stock portfolio, when the heavy buzzer to my apartment complex loudly chimed. The concierge's voice came through the intercom speaker. "Mr. Elijah, I apologize for the interruption, but there are 3 individuals in the lobby demanding to come up to your floor. They claim to be your immediate family. They are being quite loud and disruptive to the other residents." I slowly closed my laptop. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. I felt completely, entirely calm. The terrified little boy who desperately wanted their approval was dead and buried. The man standing in this expensive apartment was a senior analyst who regularly destroyed aggressive corporate competitors before breakfast. "Send them up," I instructed the concierge smoothly, "but have building security on standby." I unlocked my heavy front door and pulled it open just as the elevator pinged at the end of the long hallway. I leaned casually against the doorframe, crossing my arms over my chest, and watched them slowly walk toward me. The physical transformation was absolutely staggering. Patrick, the man who used to strut around like a billionaire CEO, looked incredibly aged. His posture was completely hunched. His cheap suit was deeply wrinkled, and his face was drawn and pale. Maren looked completely exhausted, her hair messy and her eyes red-rimmed from constant, hysterical crying. But it was Roman who looked the absolute worst. The golden boy, the handsome, arrogant prince of the family, looked completely pathetic. He was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. His shoulders were slumped, and he couldn't even make direct eye contact with me. He looked exactly like what he truly was. A spoiled, useless man-child who had finally been forced to face the harsh reality of the real world. They stopped a few feet from my door, staring at the polished hardwood floors, the expensive modern art on the walls, and the sweeping panoramic view of the city visible through my large windows. They looked like completely lost, pathetic beggars standing outside a massive palace. "Elijah," Maren gasped, tears immediately welling up in her eyes. She took a step forward, reaching her hands out as if she was going to hug me. I held up a single, flat hand, stopping her dead in her tracks. "Do not step foot inside my apartment." She flinched violently as if I had physically struck her. "Elijah, please. We are your family. We have nowhere else to go. We lost the house. We lost everything." "I know exactly what you lost," I said, my voice completely devoid of any sympathy. "Aunt Sarah filled me in on the entire disaster. You let a professional scammer gut you for every penny you had, because you were entirely blinded by your own desperate greed and Roman's massive, unearned ego." Patrick aggressively stepped forward, his face flushing red as his old, toxic habits instantly flared up. "Do not speak to your mother like that. We made a financial mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. You are my son and you make a massive salary now. We need $50,000 immediately to hire a lawyer to fight the bank and secure a new apartment. You owe this family." I actually laughed right in his face. It was a loud, genuinely amused sound that echoed loudly down the quiet hallway. "I owe you? I owe you absolutely nothing, Patrick. You literally threatened to destroy my college education and kick me out on the street to protect your fake reputation. You actively tried to ruin my future. That's in the past," he yelled, waving his hands frantically. "We are blood." "Blood doesn't mean a damn thing to me," I stated coldly. I turned my sharp gaze to Roman. He was staring at the floor, biting his lip nervously. "Look at the golden boy. Look at the king of the castle. You let a woman steal your parents' entire retirement, Roman. You destroyed them, and now you expect the invisible, worthless little brother to aggressively bail you out." Roman finally looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Elijah, please. I'm sorry. I was stupid. I need my big brother. They are going to kick me out of the trailer. I have no money for food." "Get a job," I told him bluntly. "Flip burgers. Stock shelves. Do exactly what I did when you guys were entirely too busy worshipping each other to buy me groceries." "You are a monster," Maren shrieked loudly, her face twisting into an ugly mask of pure hatred as the manipulation tactics completely failed. "You have all this wealth, and you are going to let your own mother sleep in a dirty trailer? God will actively punish you for this. God already punished the right people, I replied smoothly, completely unfazed by her toxic theatrics. You reap exactly what you sow. You spent 26 years planting seeds of pure toxicity, favoritism, and abuse. Now you get to sit in your trailer park and eat the bitter harvest. Enjoy it. I am not leaving this hallway until you write me a check, Patrick roared loudly, stepping aggressively toward me, raising his fist as if he was going to try and intimidate me physically. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I looked him dead in his tired, bloodshot eyes. If you take one more aggressive step toward me, Patrick, I will gladly press charges for trespassing and assault. I have enough money to hire lawyers that will legally bury you so deep you will never see daylight again. The absolute, cold certainty in my voice completely shattered his remaining bravado. He slowly lowered his shaking hand, the fight completely draining out of him. He looked like a deflated balloon. You are not my family, I said quietly, the finality of the statement ringing clearly in the hallway. You are just 3 complete strangers who happen to share my DNA. Do not ever come here again. Do not ever call me again. Have a nice life. Before they could utter another pathetic word or shed another fake tear, I stepped back into my beautiful apartment and slammed the heavy, reinforced wooden door directly in their faces. The loud, satisfying click of the deadbolt locking into place sounded like a massive vault securing my future. I didn't look through the peephole. I calmly walked over to the intercom and pressed the button for the front desk. Concierge? Yes, the 3 individuals in the hallway are refusing to leave. Please send Officer Davis up to escort them entirely off the property. If they resist, call the police. I walked back into my kitchen, picked up my mug of premium coffee, and walked over to the massive window. I watched the busy city streets far below. A few minutes later, I saw 3 tiny, hunched figures slowly emerge from the lobby doors, escorted tightly by the uniformed building security guard. I watched them slowly trudge down the busy sidewalk, arguing loudly with each other, completely consumed by their own massive failure, until they disappeared completely into the chaotic city crowd. I took a slow, deep sip of my coffee. The apartment was completely silent, warm, and perfectly safe. I had successfully built an incredible life from absolute scratch. I had a fierce career, a loyal mentor in Chloe, and a brilliant, unwritten future ahead of me. The massive, suffocating void they had tried to create in my life was completely filled with my own hard-earned success and self-respect. I was no longer the invisible child. I was the architect of my own destiny, and the foundation was absolutely unbreakable. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to my story all the way to the end. It wasn't an easy journey, but looking back, the hardest moments were exactly what built my strength. I hope this story resonated with you in some way, and maybe even reminded you that you don't have to accept the toxic roles people try to force you into. You have the absolute power to walk away and build your own incredible life. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, having to set hard boundaries with people who were supposed to care about you? Tell me about it in the comments. I read as many as I can. Also, if you made it to the very end of this video, you belong to a very special group. I like to call it the 1% Club. Drop a comment with the letter W for winner below. It's our secret code so I can instantly recognize the amazing people who stayed through the entire journey and came out victorious. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more stories about surviving, thriving, and karma doing its job, please hit that like button and follow the channel. It really helps the community grow. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I'll see you in the next one.